I started working for them in September of 2000 when it was 9 of us in an RV with a trailer. And we were opening for the Cottonmouth Kings and Rehab. It was Rehab, Linkin Park, Corporate Avenger, and the Cottonmouth Kings. And I just gotten a call that they needed a merch guy and a driver. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. The tour manager, Joe Molignac, came and picked me up and real late one night, and I went and stayed the night at his house. And then we had to go get the RV and the trailer, and then we picked up the gear in Hollywood on Sunset and Vine that night. I can't remember exactly what day it was, but and I met all the guys there, and then they filmed the One Step Closer video like the next couple of days. And me and my friend Johnny Verplank, the sound engineer at the time, drove the RV with the trailer and all the gear to New Orleans, House of Blues, for the first show. And they stayed behind and recorded the video for Hybrid Theory. And Joe Molignac, the tour manager, stayed behind as well. So we drove to New Orleans, and we were. I think I still have the day sheet or the tour itinerary where it has all the guarantees, which there was probably maybe 40 plus shows, almost 50 shows in the 2 months, and they were getting $100 a show. I think I still have that piece of paper. And it was really, when I heard the record, I was like, oh my God, these guys are going to be huge. When I heard Hybrid Theory, I was like, these guys are going to be really big. Like at that point in time, it was kind of what was happening with Limp Bizkit and, some other bands, but they were doing it very, very well. And I heard that record and I was like, this record's going to be huge. But I don't know. I really wasn't planning on staying on board with them. It wasn't like I was, you're so replaceable when you're on tour. You can do one tour and then the next tour, they get somebody else to work for the band. So I managed to stay on for quite a while with them, which was amazing. I left right before the Meteor came out when they went on tour with Metallica. And then I kind of just lost track after that. But in the early days, it was that's very interesting because they were very green. You know what I mean? They were very inexperienced, and Chester was a very raw talent. And I know that you've probably heard about the dressing rooms thing where they didn't even realize that there was dressing rooms, and because the bands were taking all the dressing rooms, and then Linkin Park wouldn't get any dressing rooms, and just stuff that bands that have been on tour and that have that know the ropes sort of take advantage of newer bands, unfortunately. And so yeah, that was what was happening. But they were the ones ultimately that kind of got the last laugh. Not to say that in a negative way, but they were the ones that superseded all of those bands and then some. They were the ones that they just blew up. I mean, when we were on Ozfest in 2001, I believe they started selling over 100,000 records a week, because that was when you could still sell, an actual album. And they started selling over 100,000 records a week. And it was really impressive. And I was on board with that. I was on board with that. And I was watching it happen right before my very eyes. And it was very, very interesting to see to transpire.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge to see a band blow up and be there for it, like be there before they blow up, and then see them in superstar status suddenly.
Yeah, it was really interesting because it was almost kind of almost hard to explain that because it happened so fast. I mean, it was sort of like 1 minute we were in an RV, pushing in our own gear. Like I was doing merch and driving, but I was also helping Rob Borden with drums and them loading in and out and whatever I could do. But they were doing a lot of hands-on stuff too. And then once they had gotten that we finished that tour, and then we had gotten a new tour manager. They got this guy named David Pigg, who was Van Halen's guy, and some other people, but there was like a falling out with him because of some things, and he was just not very on point. Unfortunately, he was a super nice guy, but they needed somebody that was going to really show them how things were done on the road in a very professional sense, because they were blowing up so fast. And Joe Molyneux lasted the first tour, and then David Pigg came on, and he was kind of allocating his duties to me, and I was like, I'm friends with these guys, like I'll just do whatever I got to do because they're my friends. And but it was pretty interesting. But what happened was they had a falling out with David Pigg, and then Bob Dallas came on board. And once Bob Dallas came on board, that's when everything started to shift and change into like, he really made them. I mean, he worked for Motley Crue. Bob Dallas worked for Motley Crue when they were huge, like, and Billy Idol and a bunch of other bands. He was a very, very seasoned tour manager. So when he came on board, he really straightened things out and really got the band into the position that they needed to be in, as far as like, okay, we're getting a crew bus, we're going to have a band bus, where the band is kind of going to be separated from the crew, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, I know this stuff's kind of behind the scenes stuff, which is, interesting in a sense, I guess, from people that wouldn't necessarily know what's going on behind the scenes. But that's all the things that I was seeing. I was like, having to deal with all these changes in personnel, et cetera, et cetera. And but it was fascinating to watch them sort of be humbled by their success. Like they were very much in sort of disbelief that I remember when the record came out, when we were in Seattle on tour, we were still on the first tour, and their record came out at Tower Records. And we were like, Brad Delson was like, let's go to Tower Records. And we were like, okay. So we drove the RV with the trailer to Tower Records in Seattle, and we pulled up in the parking lot, and it was like 12:05, and they had closed at midnight, and it was like 12:05. And so we get out of the RV, and we're watching the people in the store stocking their record. They were literally had boxes of Hybrid Theory, and they were stocking their record. But apparently the people that were working there, they were still, Linkin Park was still so new, they had no idea who they were. So we were standing outside of the record store, and we were knocking on the window, and they were just like kind of ignoring us, and obviously that would never happen today, but that was the day. That was actually like the midnight, like, of their record coming out. So they wouldn't let us in. So I think we ended up going back there the next day, or we had a runner from the venue took Brad and maybe Rob to go buy some CDs. But I remember they were so beside themselves because they had sold like 40,000 records the first week, and they couldn't believe it. They were like, oh my gosh, this is so incredible. Like, and needless to say, I mean, they went on to just sell millions and millions of records. But it was very interesting to watch them. They were very humbled by the experience. And one of the greatest things about Linkin Park was they were all super cool people. They're all super nice guys. But one of the greatest things that for me, witnessing everything as sort of like an outsider, but working for them, was their compassion for their fans and how they created, the street team. I watched all that happen. I watched them create the entire, they had done a lot of it prior to Hybrid Theory coming out. But mind you, 21 years ago, the World Wide Web and the internet, and, there was no MySpace, there was no, social media, so to speak. So they were doing everything kind of via email. And it was very, very organic and very, very grassroots. And it was very, very new in that time period. But one of the greatest things for me to witness with them was their absolute and total compassion and love for their fans, and starting the Linkin Park street team. And it was just so cool to watch them do that. The LPU, Linkin Park Underground. I remember them going over logos, and Mike Shinoda obviously was just creating. He's a genius. The guy is just such a workhorse and has such an amazing vision. He's a very, very talented person in the sense of musically, artistically. And he spearheaded a lot of that stuff, which I witnessed, and it was just an incredible endeavor to be a part of, and to watch how they treated their fans, how they would always grab me because they didn't have security for a long time. So they would go, Joel, come out. We're going to go sign some autographs. Because people would always come early. I mean, very early on in their career, there was always like lines of kids outside venues. They were always out waiting, to hope, obviously, to get in early and get right up in front of the stage. And then obviously, hopefully meet the guys. But Brad and Mike would always go, they would always go out. My kid's here in the house, so if he comes out, he might make a little guest appearance. But they would grab me because they didn't have a security guard at the time. They would grab me, and they would have me just come out and sort of keep an eye on them while they met fans and signed autographs and interacted with their fans. And it was just one of the most it was just such a beautiful thing. It was to see a band have that kind of love for their fan base, and like a sincere, not like they created the Linkin Park Underground. Obviously, they created things that brought their fans closer to them in every way that they could, which would, for me, looking at that, was such an inspiring thing. And it was such a new, I mean, lots of bands do that now. I mean, it's sort of like, the whole marketing aspect, being on social media, you can pretty much reach out to almost anybody and most of the time get a response from people. I've reached out to people recently that I didn't think I could get, any, a response from, and they would write me back. And I mean, now it's, people are accessible, but then 21 years ago, I mean, it was a very new thing, and they really set the tone for, the whole street team, connecting with their fans, having meet and greets. We were doing meet and greets on Ozfest, and it just was not enough time. I mean, they would have a line, like the line would be so long. And I think we were allocated maybe 30 minutes, and they would get into this tent, and me and Bob Dallas would be standing there, and we would wait, and then they would have to leave. and then all these fans would be waiting there and they wouldn't be able to meet the band because there was just so many people. So it was really, really incredible to watch them when they started Project Revolution, which I was right there watching the whole thing happen. When they started Project Revolution, their whole thing was to do meet and greets after the shows. And I mean, they would be there till really, really late because they would sign every autograph. And I know everyone probably already knows this, but they were just very adamant about making sure that no one was left out. And that inclusion with a band of that caliber, there's something very special to be said about that. And I was watching all this going down, and I was just, in the very, very beginning. I mean, because when we were in the RV, we were really like, you couldn't avoid each other. It was just insane. I was actually looking at a bunch of pictures I took. I have so many photos that like I'm apprehensive about putting them on social media because so many people just get them and then they don't give me photo credit. And I'm almost thinking about putting out a book of photos, which might actually be an easier opportunity, or an easier thing to do. But I want to stay focused on the band. But it was very hard to avoid what they were doing when you're in an RV. And then we went to one bus, and then we were still very close with one another. And then when Bob Dallas came on, they got two buses, and then more after that. But it was very, very, very amazing to watch that. Yeah. I mean, if you have anything specific that you want to ask me, I mean, I'm more than willing to answer any specific questions.
I'm sure you have so many great stories, especially like Linkin Park's a band that is known for interaction with fans, as you said, and signing autographs even till venues close, and they have to kick everyone out. And as you said, it's a different era. Like back then, it was a lot harder for them to do, but yet they did it so well. Having touring them with them, like as you said, actually there is a fun thing I want to ask, because you were mentioning you were touring in an RV all together. So the band always jokingly says Johan's rig was the size of a refrigerator. How crammed was it really?
Oh yeah, it was crazy. That road case he had, it was like, it seriously was like the size of a refrigerator. It was insane. It was crazy. I was like, what's this? Like, but also Rob's drum hardware case was pretty like, that was more like kind of like a casket coffin. But yeah, his DJ rig was massive. I mean, you could see it in all the old videos when we would just push that thing up on the stage. I mean, when we played small venues, it was like having to load that onto the stage. If most venues had ramps, but it was very cumbersome. It was pretty funny. And then later on, when they got they had a crew bus that we were on, excuse me, and they had a studio in the back of the crew bus. So they would come into the crew bus and write what came to be, well, they were working on what was the second record, the hip hop collaboration, the
Reanimation. Yeah.
Reanimation. They were working on
some of the demos from Reanimation, and even Matera, and even some collaborations originated in the band's tour bus back then.
Right. Yeah, they were working on a lot of that stuff in the back of the bus. And Johan had a DJ set. He had his turntable set up like in a bus. For those of you that don't know, when you walk onto the bus, you go back, there's the front lounge, and then you have the bunks. And then how it works is if you're a high roller band, you usually have what they're called condo bunks. So you would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You would have 8 bunks. So condo bunks means you just have more room, which are really nice. But when you're on Ozfest, you have a bunch of crew guys, you have regular, so it's 3. So it's 3, 6, 9, 12. So you have 12 bunks. So they had taken out the very back top, just the top bunk, and they set up a DJ rig for Johan on the bunk. So we would actually go in there. I remember going in there with him, and he would be like, "Here, try this," and he would be scratching, and I would just be, he would let me try to do it, and I would just be like, "Dude, like I can't do that. Like you have a very awesome skill set you got skills. Like I can't do it." But it was, again, it goes back to show you how, just how like they were so personable. Like they were really like, they just had that about them. And I think that they kind of knew like, that their fans obviously, are everything. If they don't have their fans, they don't, have success. And I don't know. I just can't say enough about that. I know I'm kind of gone on for a little while, but I just think that's so incredible. But Joe's DJ setup was insane. And then, then it went to, a semi full of merch and a semi with all their gear. And it just got totally crazy. It was insane.
Do you have any cool stories about recording any songs in the tour bus?
Well, when we were in Chicago, I mean, I don't take this in a negative way. I mean, it is what it is. But Chester was a very funny guy. He was always joking around, which I know everybody knows about because you can see video of him. He was always being a dork, and it was just amazing. He was like such a fun, incredible person to be around, and God rest his soul. I mean, he was just such a beautiful spirit. He was just so full of love, and we hit it off like with most people. I mean, he would just connect with people. Like he had that about him. He would just connect with people. So anyway, they were writing the Christmas song for K-Rock, My December. And we were in Chicago, and we were in the RV. I think we may have been in a Guitar Center parking lot, maybe in Chicago. And Mike was writing the riff on the MPC player, I think it was. And Chester started singing this, and I know no one probably knows this or remembers it, but I do. And Chester started singing this line. He said, "Christmas time is a good time to die." And I was like, "Are you serious, dude?" Like I was busting up laughing. I think everybody kind of was just chuckling because it was like, if you know Chester and you know his character, he was just like, that came off the top of his head, and he was like, it was so hilarious. I mean, I remember that obviously because it was super funny, and it just always sticks with me. It's interesting how your mind will, keep certain memories and then, disregard others. But I don't remember anything specific as far as being on the road. We did that. I remember being at the video shoot for Nathan Cox produced the video, and it was them playing acoustic instruments. I can't even remember the song. It was when Chester had the red mohawk, and what song was that? I can't remember. I got to be on the set of one of the videos that they had done, which was really cool. It was super fun. But as far as writing is concerned, I remember also in Chicago, we started Ozfest. We had flown from Tokyo to Chicago, we had just done a promo tour in Japan. We had toured. We did a promo tour in Australia, New Zealand, and Japan, and we flew back from Tokyo to Chicago and started Ozfest. It was so interesting flying across the international date line and like kind of like catching up with time. It was amazing. I'd never done that before. And we got to Chicago and we got this new tour bus, and that's when they had all this stuff set up in the tour bus. Excuse me. And some of the wires had caught on fire in the front lounge. And I was like, they were in the back writing songs in the back lounge. And and I smelled the wires burning, and I didn't know if it was going to be, if the whole front lounge was going to catch on fire. I just smelled wires burning. And I ran back to the back of the bus. I was like, dude, the bus might catch on fire. I was kind of being dramatic, but I didn't really know. They would have been trapped in the back if it would have caught on fire. And Brad and Mike and everybody ran out. And they ended up, obviously, it was just some wire thing or whatever. But yeah, man, I mean, there was also times we were on Ozfest. I have a bunch of pictures of it when we got one of those golf carts and drove it around with me and Mike. Actually, me and Mike were driving around and eating pizza, and I was like just flying around in this golf cart. It was like a golf cart with the flatbed on the back. It was green, and me and Shinoda were driving around and just getting crazy, having so much fun. And then Phoenix was like, I want to go on a ride. And I think that he had gotten in the passenger side and I was driving, and he's like, go up the curb. And I remember hitting the curb, and it was not good. I mean, we slammed into the curb and flew up, and there was this like metal part right above his shins, and his shins got so jacked on this steel on the golf cart. He was laughing though too. And I have pictures of that. I mean, that was kind of just like, I mean, in between all the, because there's a lot of waiting around when you're on the road, man. I mean, it's actually kind of boring, but those guys always seemed like to be working on some cool stuff. Mike was always busy working on artwork or doing, they kept themselves so busy with their band and all of the things that they created to connect with their fans, that it was definitely hard to get bored. But there's a lot of downtime on tour, and they just were great utilizers of time. I mean, they just took advantage of all that. It was just amazing, man. So I mean, back to the studio or writing songs. I remember being at the Roxy for the Jay-Z collab, which was super rad. I just came up there. I wasn't even working for them at the time. It was a little bit after I had quit working for them, and Brad was like, dude, you have to go with us to the Roxy. He's like, get in the van right now. And I was like, are you serious? He's like, yes, get in the van. And we went like from a hotel, like it was like right down the street into the Roxy. And I'm sitting in the booth, and I'm like, and Jay-Z rolls in, and I'm like, dude, it was just crazy. I was like, that guy's so iconic. And then they did, they played some songs, and it was really fascinating to watch that take place with just, I mean, I think it was Jim Digby and one of Jay-Z's friends and the band and maybe one tech. And it was like us sitting in the Roxy, and I was like, dude, I'm in the Roxy with Linkin Park and Jay-Z, and they're doing this collaboration, and it's like it was rad. It was really, really amazing to watch and witness.
Do you have any other particular gigs that stick out?
Any other what?
Any other particular gigs stick out to you as like most memorable ones?
It's so crazy because at when we started touring in 2001, in September of 2001, we finished off the year, but then in 2000, I'm sorry, I don't know if I said 2001. In 2000, September of 2000, we started on the Cottonmouth Kings tour. But then in 2001, I think we had done over 300 shows that year.
Yeah,
If I'm
2001
not
was
mistaken.
the first international, like worldwide tour where they traveled to Asia, Europe, Australia for the first time.
Was 2001.
Yeah, that
And
must
I
be really excited for all the firsts for you too, like traveling around the world like that.
right. And that I didn't go on that tour. The only tour I went on in Europe, well, actually I went on the Deftones tour,
Mhm.
was their first European tour with Taproot, and so I think Static X might have been on some of those shows too, where they were opening for Deftones. And but after a while, it just all sort of becomes, sort of a, I don't want to say a blur, but it kind of does become sort of a blur.
Mhm.
I mean, we were doing Ozfest, but we were also doing Offest. So we were doing these Offest shows with Papa Roach, I believe, and POD. So we would be doing, on the Ozfest days off, we would be doing shows called Offest, where they would still be super big shows with Papa Roach, POD. I think Disturbed. I think Disturbed might have been on some of those. Here's a pretty fun story. We were in Colorado on Ozfest, and they had, it was Linkin Park, Crazy Town, Disturbed, and I think Papa Roach, who all four bands had the K-Rock radio show in New York at Jones Beach.
Mhm.
So we left Denver Ozfest and got on a private jet, which the gear barely fit in. I remember them loading the gear in the bottom of the plane, and it was like almost too much stuff. And we didn't even take everything. They were just taking like carry-ons, and they had just guitars. And all the bands got on this private jet. And it was a good sized private jet, because I mean, there was a lot of people, a crew, 4 bands. And we flew from Denver to New York, did the radio show, got right back on the plane, loaded all the gear back up, flew from New York to LA, did K-Rock Weenie Roast. I think it was Weenie Roast. Yeah. K-Rock Weenie Roast in Irvine. Then got right back then flew on a regular flight to Seattle, to the Gorge, to catch back up with Ozfest. So that was like pretty insane. I mean, and that was sort of like normal. I mean, believe it or not, unless you're like Ozzy or like even Linkin Park now, I'm sure, but in the beginning, management, booking agents, they will just take you like a washcloth and wring it out until there's nothing left. And in the sense of completely maximizing, I mean, they would just put so much stuff in such a little amount of time, and you just have to do it. And that's the thing that's crazy about bands in particular. And I think a lot of the times it's not very beneficial mentally, physically, but in those early days, they just had to do what they had to do to, get the success that they were, seeking. I mean, but that there's good memories of that. That was just a fun, like, couple days. I was like, wow, I was just in Denver. Wow, I'm in New York. No, I'm in LA. Now I'm in Seattle in like, 36, 48 hours.
I actually want to ask you about that. Like the band became so big so fast, so it they didn't have that much experience before. So it must have been extremely exhausting with all the excessive touring and all. As you said, they were super busy. The management would book as many shows and everything they can. So how did the band hold up to that day-to-day stress in the early days? And did that affect any of their personal relationships or with their management, or with their vision on success and stuff like that?
I think that it definitely, they knew that it was part of uh it was just part of what you had to do in the beginning of being a band, but also the demands that, I mean, because once you become, I don't know what level it is that you get to where you're just like, okay, you've sold, 2 million records. And so now everybody wants a piece of you. And that's really what it was. So it's a matter of like management, allocating, is this going to be good for the band, and then obviously the band having the final say in it. But in those early days, they kind of just did everything that was asked of them from management, and sort of just did what they needed to do when they were on tour with the tour manager, because they didn't know any better. But I could see that it was taking a toll a little bit. I know that Brad kind of struggled a little bit with it, and I'm not saying that in a negative way. You know what I mean? He was just, wanted to be home with his wife. And I mean, this is before all of them had. I mean, Chester and Samantha were actually. Samantha was pregnant on 2001 with with Draven, but I think it was 2001, if I'm not mistaken. It has to be. He's got to be like 20 years old now. But that was before all of them had kids, and you know what I mean? Like, I mean, so they really didn't have a lot of responsibility. Well, not responsibility, but you know how when you're married and you have kids, they were all like pretty dialed in with their significant other. But I could tell it was kind of taxing, and also it's like, it really kind of doesn't matter, like, in my opinion, like how like you can be super successful and have all the luxuries that you want on tour, but it's just not like being at home. Like, there's touring is basically like, I could just tell that it was getting to, Brad a little bit. And I remember him saying like, I don't want to tour anymore. But it was just one of those things where it was like, it's just, it gets old after a while. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. But I mean, obviously they were out there, they had a mission, they had fans to cater to, but it was definitely one of those things where you don't want to have to tour to make money, so to speak. You know what I mean? You don't want to have to be on the road in order to, I mean, some people really love it. But I think after a while with Linkin Park anyway, I mean, a lot of bands, bigger bands that don't tour a lot, they don't have to tour a lot. You know what I mean? That's the thing. That's the difference between, bands that are smaller that have to tour in order to make a living, and bands that are bigger that made enough money already and they don't have to tour. So they can just be like, hey, we're going to play, a couple shows and, make some extra money and whatever. And, but I watched it kind of, they were so young though. I mean, it was just one of those things. It wasn't like, excuse me, it wasn't like they were, it wasn't like they hated it. You know what I mean? They were just kind of doing whatever they had to do to support that record,
That makes sense. Do you remember how was it when Phoenix came back to the mix because he rejoined the band mid-tour for Hybrid Theory.
Yeah. What was that guy's name that was playing bass before he came back? Was it Dave? No, I can't remember the bass player because they had a.
Kyle
What was
or Scott or Ian. Who was it?
I can't remember.
Scott, Ian.
Been a while. Scott. I think
Yeah.
it was Scott.
Mhm.
He well, he was the guy that I met originally. I hadn't met Phoenix yet. And he was super cool, you know. I mean, he was a great bass player, and it was interesting, you know, being a hired person, you know, it's not always, you know, a fun position to be in, you know, especially when you're there watching the band become really successful and you're playing with them every night, knowing that, you know, somebody's going to come back and, you know, take your place. And I know that he was pretty bummed about that, but what are you going to do? But yeah, I kind of, when Phoenix came back, it was kind of just, he's super cool. He was super nice, just super sweet guy. He came back and it was just like, kind of like a breath of fresh air, you know? I mean, it was like, he was just super positive and super into, you know, being with his people. And, I don't even think it was like any kind of like crazy transition or anything. It was just like, hey, Phoenix is here and he's the bass player. You know what I mean? And I was just like, okay, rad. Like, let's do this. Like, it was just there was no, it was just like, okay, cool. Scott left and Phoenix came in and it was just like, okay, we're all, and then, you know, I think that he was pretty, I think that he was pretty surprised at the success. If I can remember correctly, I think that he was pretty much like, wow, is this really happening? You know, I mean, I'm sure that he knew that, you know, Hybrid Theory was going to be a really big, you know, a record that was going to sell a lot of records and be successful. I mean, with the radio play with One Step Closer and, you know, in the end, and then, you know, all the singles off that first record, it was crazy. I think that, like I said, I really think that he was kind of surprised at how big that they really became. I mean, it was, you know, I think that everyone was kind of surprised, you know, at like, oh my God, is this really happening? I remember them getting their gold records. I think we were in Sacramento at playing a show with was it Papa Roach maybe at some place? And it was right before, excuse me, the holiday 2000, I believe. And the management came out and brought everybody their gold record. And I was just like, dude, that's amazing. I mean, that thing's really rare too, because they went platinum so fast that it was just like, they got the gold record and then it was like the platinum one was right after that. And I remember they were like, hey, do you want one? Because when we were still in like one bus, we went to my parents' house. My parents lived in Missouri and retired there. We had stopped with the bus on Thanksgiving and had Thanksgiving at my parents' house. And they were super stoked on my parents. So they said, hey, we want to get your parents a platinum plaque. And I had gotten one, but the gold one's pretty rare because they had gone platinum so fast. But as far as Phoenix is concerned, I just think that he was really kind of surprised at like how quickly they, you know, they just got so huge, man.
Like you've mentioned in this interview, they've played with so many bands. And do you recall or have any photos of Chester coming out on stage with other bands?
Yeah, actually, I have some. I don't know if did you see the ones of him coming out with Head PE? Did you see any of those photos?
I did not.
I have a couple photos. I think I may actually have one photo. We were playing a radio show in Florida, and Chester had came out with Head PE because he was super good friends with Wes. and had sang a song. I don't remember which one it was, but he came out with them and sang a song at this radio show. And then I can't remember right off the top of my head, thinking of anything right off the top of my head where he came out with any other. Hey, you gotta be quiet with that, okay? I can't remember anything right off the top of my head when we come out with anybody else, but I for some reason want to think that he had done that with on Ozfest or something, but I just can't recall.
An interesting thing is, I don't know if you've seen that, but Mike is since coronavirus started, he's been doing live streams on Twitch, making music or just talking with fans and stuff. I don't know if you're aware of that, but recently he actually mentioned a story about you.
He did? I had no idea.
He was talking about it was kind of towards the end of a tour, and it was this shirt that wasn't really selling, and you got it and kind of cut it up and wore it yourself, like customized it, and then people actually started asking for that to buy it, so you started doing that.
Yeah. Oh my God. It was that's so rad that he did that. It was so weird. I remember cutting the shirt up, just being like, this thing's not rad. Like, it's just a girl's shirt. Like, it was a girl's crew neck shirt. Like, it's a t-shirt. And I cut the sleeves and the neck off, and like, they had me at one point. Mike Shinoda's birthday was in Nebraska one year. We were on Project Revolution, the first Project Revolution, and Brad got on the radio and was all, Joel Bull, get to the dressing room. And I went to the dressing room. He's like, okay, dude, here's the deal. You got to go get a bra from somewhere and like a hat, and like, you're going to come out on stage with the cake and you're going to act like you're Marilyn Monroe. And you're going to say, telegram for Mikey Shinoda. And I'm like, okay. I mean, cause like, what am I going to do? Say, dude, I can't do that. Like, I'm just like, okay, like I'm in, like, just whatever you want. So we went and got the stuff, and like, it was so intense, dude. I remember walking up the ramp on the stage with the mic and the cake and the flames. And I have a picture actually of me and Mike. It's classic. They used to have me do all kinds of stuff like that. So like the shirt thing, I was like, let's just take all these shirts back and cut them, like sew the edges. And we did. And then the shirt sold. We sold out of all of them. That's so rad though that he mentioned that.
So yeah, and it was actually really recent. So it was, we were.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, we were scheduling the interview and everything, and then that comes up, and it was interesting. So what happened after Hybrid Theory? Did you go on the road anymore? And did you keep in touch actually with the band, or did you see them perform anymore later?
No, what happened is that I kind of I mean, it was like they were going out on the road with Metallica for the Meteora record, and they had hired a guy that I was going to be working underneath, that had more experience in arena tours, because they were obviously going to be playing arenas with Metallica. And I honestly was just I was kind of butthurt by the whole thing. I was kind of like, man, I've been working my butt off, and now there's this guy coming in, and I'm like going to be the second, which, like I said earlier, it's like you're so replaceable when it comes to touring. They always, I mean, aside from being an actual band member, I mean, you can replace a bass player or a guitar player, and it could be as good when you're talking singers. I mean, it's a different deal, or drummers too, for that matter. But I just kind of, you're always replaceable. And I just kind of was like, oh man, that's a bummer, dude. And then I was thinking, wow, what am I going to do? Am I just going to, is this going to be it for me? And so what ended up happening is I ended up going to work for a merch company and staying home. And I was bummed. Wrote a letter of resignation to everybody, telling them and thanking them so much. It was emotional, man. I mean, it really was. I was like, I was really sad, to be very honest. I did not want to stop working for Linkin Park, and I don't think that they really saw that coming. I don't really think that they really. It was kind of a like spontaneous reaction, so to speak, on my behalf. And I didn't want to stop working for them. And that's when I came up to the Reanimation deal with Jay-Z and hung out with them and just tried to stay in touch with them as much as I could. And then obviously the last time I saw them was at Chester's, memorial, which was really amazing to see everybody, but under just the worst circumstances possible. I mean, it was just, obviously it was just terrible, but it was super good to see them after so many years of not seeing them. But yeah, I went on to work for another merch company, and then I went out on the road with a band called Reverend Horton Heat for like 5 years. And then I ended up starting my own merchandise company. And then recently, because of COVID, I just started working for a new company called Overcast Merch, which is a great company out of Long Beach. And they do Blink-182, Descendants, Bad Religion, and then a bunch of, retail. They do online stuff. It's incredible. And I get to work from home. So they're great. But that's what happened. And I'll be honest, man, I was sad. I was super sad because being as close as I was. And then Chester actually lived down here in Newport where I grew up. He bought a house and he was living down here. And I would walk around. I lived right by him, and I would walk around and exercise in the neighborhood that he lived in. And one day I was walking by, and there he was. He had a bounce house out in the front. I was like, dude, what's up, man? And he's like, what's up? And I went in and had lunch with him, and it was super rad. It was super. I think actually that may have been the last time that I had hung out with him. But we were close. Me and Chester were tight. He was really easy to like. He was just a really easy person to get along with. I mean, he had his demons, like, most people do, obviously. But yeah, I'll be very honest. I was very, very upset and sad that I was no longer working for them, because part of it's your ego. You know what I mean? Part of it's like, you're like, dude, I work for Linkin Park. Like, what do you do? Like, not that I would really say that like in that way, but it was like, sort of like, dude, you work for Linkin Park? And it's like, yeah, I work for Linkin Park. Those guys are my good friends. And it was sort of like my identity in a way. So in one regard, it was nice for me to sort of move away from that in a sense and become my own person. But at the same time, aside from the ego aspect of it, we were genuinely great friends, all of us. I mean, it was just when when you're seeing them every day, when you're on the road with them, 300 plus days out of the year, it's hard. You either become friends or enemies. I mean, let's be real. I mean, you're either going to like grow toward one another, or you're going to grow apart. And the people that I would grow apart from would be the crew people, which I always stayed cool with pretty much everybody. But I was always really always really cool with the band. And they always had me doing fun shit. They always had me doing fun stuff. You've probably seen the new footage in the box set of me riding the little bike in the backstage area. They actually, I wish they would have videoed me riding the bike out on the stage when Stain was playing. It's been a while. That was like what they're like, dude, you got to get the bike. And then I had a cigar, and I like put my boxers on my head and just took my clothes off. And I was like, I'll just go for it. And they're like, yeah, dude, go right out on the stage. And I was like, okay. And so I got on this little bike and I rode out on the stage when they were playing It's Been a While, and it was just the bass player was, I think he was kind of sour about it, but we were all laughing very much. It was the last day of the tour, of the Family Values tour, with Stone Temple Pilots and Stained and Static X and Linkin Park, and I think there may have been another band, but it was it was in Tacoma at the Tacoma Dome, and it was memorable.
That's so cool. I have one last question.
Sure.
When did you notice that things really started to change in terms of getting successful? Like, what was the point, the event that made you realize, oh, this, now they're getting big, now it's getting serious?
I definitely, I kind of remember that very vividly. We were on Ozfest, 2001, and it's weird because when you're that close with a band, you're getting the behind the scenes information. So you're like, hey, we're selling 100,000 records a week. You know what I mean? Like, you're on the charts. You've got 2 or 3 singles or whatever. I mean, which is public information, but well, most of that stuff is. But I was so in tune with kind of the heartbeat of what was happening, because I was so close with the band and doing their merchandise and whatnot. But I remember very, 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 very specifically, it was on Ozfest that they started to become huge. Like, they were, let me see, I think it was Crazy Town. They were either second or third, or I can't remember, man. It's been so long. It's been, 20 plus years, but they were playing the main stage, and I think they were playing before Disturbed, if I'm not mistaken. But I remember specifically on Ozfest when they started selling like 100,000 records a week. And I remember watching all the people in the crowd. That's what really kind of was like, when they were singing all the songs, and it was like in amphitheaters, and I was just like, dude, this is insane. Because again, they didn't have security then. So I was acting as there's kind of as Chester's, like, I mean, you can see in some of the video footage of the early live stuff where I'm actually holding Chester by the back of his belt loop while he's singing in the crowd at a couple amphitheaters. And then I'm always on the side of the stage with a freaking giant sweat ring down my shirt, because it was in the middle of summer in the Midwest. And so I was watching all of this going down from the side of the stage with several other people, but I was watching it because on Ozfest, they sell merch for you. So they had me doing setlist towels and water. They had me doing bus parking. They had me doing catering. They had me doing band assistant. I mean, I had so many jobs. I was going crazy. The last day of Ozfest in New Jersey and Red Bank, I was so done. I was so ready to go home. That's when Jacoby started a riot. And he hid on our bus. And the cops were looking for him, and we had him in the back lounge of the Linkin Park bus. That was so rad. But it was definitely Ozfest when I saw them get super huge. I mean, it was just really really fascinating to watch that. I mean, it was like, wow, these guys are blowing up.
So cool. Like, hearing all these stories from you, like the backstage stories that only a handful of people know, and sharing them with us is so super cool for me.
Right on. Yeah. I just, I mean, I'm just so grateful that I had the opportunity to be there. I mean, I never really thought like, oh, hey, dude, in 20 years, you're going to look back and, Chester's not going to be here. And this band's going to be this globally known phenomenon in a sense. I mean, really, like, let's be real. It's like, I mean, they are just like, I mean, in the middle of all that, I wasn't thinking 20 years down the road. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I surely was not thinking, you know, that Chester wasn't going to be here. I mean, excuse me. I mean, that's like, I surely wasn't, you know, thinking that. He was a really, really rad guy, man. I miss that guy. I'm glad that I got to spend as much time as I did with him. Um, you know, he was just a really special person. It was just such a fun time, and like such a like unique time, and in music in general, and like being there for it. Like I want to say thank you for having me, and like being interested in, you know, the being interested in my involvement with them, because we really, I love those guys, man. I mean, they were just so much fun, and they always had my back, and they were, you know, just such good people, and they obviously still are, and I miss them. You know, I miss hanging out with them, even though it's been 20 plus years. It's still one of those things where you're like, and for me, I mean, I never went to college. You know, I just, you know, I got, you know, I just didn't do that. So for me, going on tour with Linkin Park was kind of like my college. It really was. It was really, I met so many great people. I still have super good friends from that time period that I keep in contact with. And yeah, I'm just super grateful that I had the opportunity to be a part of that. I mean, not a lot of people, like you said, you know, it's like a handful of people were there that, you know, like that get that chance to be behind the scenes like that, you know. So it's pretty amazing.
It is. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for all the stories you shared with us. It was really, really cool to
You're
hear
welcome.
all that behind the scenes.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And just want to give a shout out to all the people that I met on the road, and tell you that, you know, it was a super awesome, fun experience for me, and to the band, and rest in peace, Chester, man. I love you and I miss you, buddy.